Hi, this is She's Making Something, and today I'm going to share how I put together this extra tall semi-fault line cake, so stick around. So today's cake is a 6-inch red velvet cake with a cream cheese buttercream frosting. And I'm using a 10-inch gold cake board because once all 4 layers are stacked, the cake is 8 inches tall, and I wanted a wider base to give it more stability. Any cake stacked higher than 3 layers should have extra support to stop it from sinking or collapsing on itself. And I've had some cakes be 4 layers when I made them, and then only 3 when I cut into them later because the weight of the top layers literally squished the bottom layer into non-existence. So I add 3 dowels into the bottom layer to support another cake board. This one cut smaller than 6 inches, so the edges of the board don't stick out past my cake and make frosting more difficult. This is basically like making a 2-tiered cake, but my tiers are exactly the same size instead of getting smaller, which gives it an extra tall effect. Then the final 2 layers just go on top. And as I place them, I realized I did not think about the height of the cake when I set up my camera, but I was too involved now to stop and change it, so sorry. I also added a final dowel through all the layers, so they won't slide off each other. Then I just crumb coat the entire thing. After the crumb coat was done, I went to put it in the fridge to chill, and the camera caught a pesky frosting thief red-handed. She thought she was being so sneaky. Anyways, I have a chilled crumb coat and 4 different colors of the same cream cheese frosting: white, light pink, red, and a maroon. I used a toothpick to mark out where I wanted my color sections to be, so hopefully I can keep them properly balanced and not have one color take up too much space on the cake. Then I started filling in my white section first. This technique is almost like making an ombre cake, but instead of putting all the colors on and smoothing them out together, blending them into that fantastic ombre, I am putting the colors on one by one and smoothing them out separately. I am doing 4 layers of colors, but I don't want to build up the frosting the whole way down the cake. So not only am I trying to keep my colors within their sections, but as I smooth it out, I hold my scraper at an angle to taper and thin out the bottom edge of my section, so that when I overlap with my next color, the frosting doesn't build up and become too thick. As each new layer starts, I pipe my top edge first. Then when I smooth it out later, I try not to scrape that away or smooth it out too much, because I want that ledge to be there. Otherwise it won't have that fault line effect and it'll just be a normal ombre. This is when I realized I forgot to chill my cake before I switched colors. And this is important because I want my colors to stay separate and not blend into each other. Any thin spots in the pink will just have to be fixed later, because if I keep messing with it, I risk smearing the white. So I just had to be extra careful as I finish the pink, and then make sure to chill it before I move on to the next color. After remembering to chill it this time, I just do the same thing again with my last two color sections. Piping the top edge so that it overlaps with the bottom of the previous section, and then fill it in. Gotta make sure to leave that top edge thick so I get that ledge, which makes it look like a thicker section of frosting is wrapped around the cake, giving it that semi-fault line effect. And then thin out the bottom edge so I don't overwhelm my cake with too much frosting. In order to make sure my colors went well together, I started by making the bright red. Then took a little of that same red and mixed it with the white to make the pink, and then added a little bit of purple to the red to make the maroon. This way all my colors had a similar base, so I knew they would be cohesive. Once my final section was done, and I didn't thin out the bottom of this one, I took that same maroon color and using a Wilton 2D tip, piped a single large rosette on top. Then I used the white frosting and a small round tip to pipe a simple pearl border along the bottom edge. By adding some white at the bottom and the maroon at the top, I hope to add more balance to the overall design. To make the leaves, I just melted some white chocolate, and after it had cooled a little, put some in a Ziploc bag, because I ran out of my smaller piping bags, and piped some leaf shapes freehand. I could have printed out a template to stick under the parchment paper. That would give me a similar size and shape for all the leaves, but I was in a bit of a hurry and didn't want to take the time to do that. So I did a few practice leaves to get a feel for how the chocolate would act and to give me a better idea of how I wanted them to look. It was important that all pieces of the leaf were connected and thick enough that they wouldn't break apart when I tried to handle them. I only needed 2 leaves for my cake, but I find it a good habit to always make a few extra because you never know what can happen, especially when working with fragile chocolate. Once I was done piping the leaves and the chocolate was still soft, I used a toothpick to smooth down a few areas and give them some nicer edges. Then put them in the fridge to harden while I made the gold paint. To make edible paint, I mixed luster dust with some extract. In my case, I used lemon extract, but any clear extract would work. I had a bright yellow gold and a darker gold, but when I tested them, neither were quite what I had in mind, so I ended up mixing the 2 colors of dust together to give me the shade of gold I was looking for. I added the extract a little at a time until I got a paint-like consistency. And then, using a food-safe brush, just painted my new gold color onto the hardened chocolate leaves. Once the leaves were done, they went back into the fridge to stay stiff, and I used that exact same gold that I mixed to paint the edges of my fault lines. The cake has also been chilled, so the frosting is hard to touch and won't smear as I paint. I tried to be careful and keep the gold only on the ledge, but mistakes happen, and you just have to roll with it sometimes. I also tried to keep my brush not overloaded with paint because I didn't want to accidentally add too much and have it drip down the sides. Once all the gold is added to the cake, the final thing to do is add those leaves on top. I picked my 2 favorite ones and very, very gently lifted them into place. And ta-da! One completed cake. This was a lot of fun planning and designing this in my head, and it's always very satisfying when the end result turns out exactly as I pictured. If you love the cake too, hit that like button and go ahead and subscribe to get notified the next time I'm making something. Thanks for watching.